In every single patch since Rek'Sai's mid-scope update in February of 2024, Conqueror has been the most popular keystone choice by a mile, and Stridebreaker has been the most popular first item. Both of these are wrong. I've been playing Rek'Sai since she came out in 2014, and I've hit Grandmaster playing her in several years in a row now. I'm definitely not the best Rek'Sai player, but I'm at the very least qualified to share exactly why I think Conqueror and Stridebreaker aren't her best options. I'm not the first person to try to answer which item is best. And when other people comment on it, they all say this.
The thing is, when it comes to build choice, the one that you like is the one you should go.
And that's just not true. There is a correct answer to this question. There is one rune, one item, and one build that is better than the others. To get to the bottom of this, we need to figure out what each item does that the other cannot. So both items cost the exact same, and their build paths are similar enough that I'm not going to get into their differences. As a quick side note, when you're building either of these items, don't build the Tiamat as your first component. It gives 20 AD despite costing 500 gold more than 2 longswords. The passive isn't that good because you're never bottlenecked by your ability to kill the small monsters in a clear, which is the only thing the passive is good for. Your Q and your jungle pet AoE damage are plenty enough to be able to kill those. So you're paying 500 gold for the active. And the active is good, don't get me wrong, it's just not worth 500 gold. Get Phage or Tunneler instead. Now let's look at the stats. Titanic gives 150 more HP, worth 400 gold, and some on-hit physical damage based on your total HP. The value of that stat goes up the more HP you have, but if you finish Titanic at level 8, it starts out as 19 on-hit damage, worth about 400 gold. Keep in mind that buying HP is extra valuable because it increases the healing from your passive, so this extra HP gets converted into even more HP through bonus healing. Stridebreaker gives about 625 gold worth of attack speed. So comparing these stats, Titanics are slightly better for Rek'Sai. Attack speed is just not a stat that Rek'Sai really wants. It's not bad, it's just worse than HP or AD or ability haste or resistances. But the real difference in these items is not about the stats. It's about the passives and actives. So let's start with Stridebreaker. The active slows enemies and gives you movement speed based on how many people you hit. The slow can be very useful because it's longer range than your knockup, so you can get under enemies that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. It can definitely be the difference between getting a kill or not. Here's an example of that. Like we can see here that Kai'Sa was able to react to me showing up and run away. If I couldn't slow her, I'd get charmed by Rakan and never be able to get on her, and this whole play would not be possible. It also does damage in a circle around the target you're hitting, applying your passive to everyone hit. The movement speed from Stridebreaker's passive can be really good defensively too. Look at this clip that includes both me getting on top of someone because of Stridebreaker, and then just a few seconds later using the movement speed defensively to get away after a nice sidestep. With any other item here, I would die. I think this is the biggest selling point to Stridebreaker right here. In teamfights, you can go in, knock several people up, and then use this huge burst of movement speed to get away. So now let's talk about Titanic. Specifically, let's talk about the passive and the active, starting with the active. The active does two things. It makes you do a bit more damage with your next auto, and it gives you an auto reset. The auto reset is super important because it allows you to have 2 auto resets in your kit with the Q and the Titanic, allowing you to do this combo. This combo is a crazy amount of burst, and it allows you to fully stack up your passive without having to hit a Prey Seeker first. It does not give the enemy a lot of room for counterplay, which is what makes this item so good. Look at this example where I try to burst a Viego while my Prey Seeker was on cooldown. I would never kill him here with Stridebreaker, not even close. I wouldn't have been able to stack up my passive enough to get an empowered E off, so my ult wouldn't have done enough damage to bring him low enough to die to my Prey Seeker. And here's one where I kill a Victor too. Combos like this happen several times a game, every single game. Once I get used to playing Rek'Sai with this in mind, I could never go back to Stridebreaker. The difference is night and day. And the benefits of Titanic don't even end there. The Cleave's AoE attacks are in a different shape than Stridebreaker, and Titanic's shape is just better. It's just better to attack further behind a target than it is to attack further to the side of a target. I'm going to be showing a lot of clips here where that AoE damage applies my passive, allowing me to ult and kill someone I couldn't dream of doing with Stridebreaker. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to talk about how good Rek'Sai's ult is. I mean, look at the range in this ability. You can dash from a screen away onto someone and have a point-and-click undodgeable execute. It's an OP ability balanced by the fact that you have to have already damaged someone to be allowed to ult them. If you dodge her Prey Seeker or someone blocks it, she has to be or have been in melee range to put her passive on you. Or at least that's how it's supposed to be. Titanic kind of breaks this balance. Not to mention that this AoE damage hitting more targets doesn't just apply your passive better, it applies your Serpent's Fang better, your Black Cleaver better, and just damage in general better. I get some sort of situational value out of Titanic that Stridebreaker could not give me every single game. Remember that one of the two things Stridebreaker can do that Titanic can't do is provide you with a longer range slow on enemies to help you knock them up? Well, once your Smite completes around 17 minutes, Smite range is longer than that Stridebreaker range and does the same job of slowing an enemy out of range of your knockup. Stride is still better than Smite because it's an AoE slow, and it gives you movement speed, and you don't have to wait until your Smite is completed to be able to use it. But considering that there are only two things Stridebreaker can do better than Titanic, and one of them isn't even that necessary most of the time after your Smite completes, how can you justify buying it? So, in conclusion, Titanic is better tankiness, better damage, better burst damage, and it's better at applying your passive, your cleaver, and your Serpent's Fang. And Stridebreaker is better at helping you get in range of enemies, and at giving you movement speed to run away. If I haven't just convinced you to start using Titanic, maybe the win rate will.
How many diapers can he possibly use? Oh, that's not so much. So?
Let's talk about runes now. Just like with items, I'm hardly the first person to suggest that Press the Attack is better than Conqueror. So I went to the Rek'Sai main subreddit and the accompanying Discord to search for what people were saying in this discussion. While there are plenty of people that are PTA pilled like me, it seems the consensus is that Conqueror is best. Here's Rek'Sai Kitten, an EUS Challenger Rek'Sai main who I definitely consider an authority on the champion, calling PTA a bait rune, saying it's not that good, and mocking me for thinking it's her best rune. So when you go and ask people why they prefer Conqueror, the answer will be any of, well, Conqueror is better in an extended fight. Or, I'm high rank. I really want to read this one out loud. Nah, you're a low elo player. I'm D178 LP currently, and Conk is a much superior rune. If all enemy team is squishy, you can consider Hail of Blades. Or lastly, just no explanation at all. So let's actually talk about what the runes do different. Conqueror gives you AD when you damage any champion with any spell. This is certainly easier to stack than PTA because it stacks off of abilities and autos as opposed to just autos, which is nice. PTA does some damage when you hit the same target 3 times and then increases all of your damage by 8% indefinitely until you leave combat. It's important to note that the damage amp is not only versus the target that you proc PTA on, and that the 6-second cooldown between procs starts as soon as you finish a proc, not as soon as you leave combat, so you can get multiple procs off of it in one fight. Both runes only do damage, so you might think it's pretty easy to just ask which rune does more damage and call it a day, but this problem is surprisingly complex. The best way to go about answering it is to figure out what kind of situations each rune outperforms the other in, and then look at how often these situations are coming up in a real game. I found that every fight as Rek'Sai boils down to one of 4 categories. So let's take a closer look at each one. Remember this screenshot? This is where Rek'Sai Kitten basically says PTA is trash because it has done 0 damage at this point in the game where he is 3-0. So for PTA to have done 0 damage, I'm assuming these must have been his combos for all 3 kills, as you can't auto more than twice. Rek'Sai Kitten makes a good point. The situation definitely does happen, and Conqueror does do more damage here. It could be the difference between getting a kill or not. Here's a clip that's somewhat similar that I just had to include because it has a triple tunnel. If we're looking closely, we'll see that PTA would never be procced here, and it would do 0 damage. It's not because the fight is so short that we can't get 3 autos off like it was in the practice tool, it's just because the target dies. And these situations where PTA can't be procced do happen, and Conqueror is just straight up better. So what about the situations where you can proc PTA, like this one, and the clips from earlier in the video where I used Titanic to fast combo people? Let's test them too. I'll be showing 2 test cases for PTA. One is the optimal case, where we proc the rune before pressing our abilities, and another less ideal but still realistic case where we proc it after our abilities. We could do the same thing for Conqueror, but because our E and our R and our auto attacks all have a 1.0 AD ratio, it makes no difference. And for this Titanic test, I mean, you're always going to get 3 autos off, so I didn't even bother with the non-optimal test. And this right here is why I take PTA. If you proc it after you use your abilities, it still does more damage than Conqueror. And once you finish Titanic, you're almost always getting the optimal case. But what about extended fights? And yeah, you're right. Conqueror does do more damage in an extended fight. So now the question we should ask is, how long does the fight have to go before Conqueror gets better than PTA? So, with the power of video editing, I can showcase that exactly. Again, with 2 tests for PTA, because you don't always have time to proc PTA before biting or ulting. If you're counting autos, you'll notice that it takes 6, 7, and 9 autos, respectively, for our level 3, 5, and 6 tests for Conqueror to outpace PTA. You'll also notice that PTA will outperform Conqueror once it comes off cooldown because we get to proc it again. I end the test there, but if it kept going, Conqueror would win out again. As we conclude these tests, we're getting a decent idea when Conqueror starts to outperform PTA. At the end of the day, this is just an estimate because PTA is giving damage amp to our E and R, which both have scalings based on the target's max and missing HP. So without knowing those, which we can't in the practice tool, it's hard to have a definitive test. We can only do an estimate. And once again, with this last test with Titanic, I'm not going to bother with the situation where we don't proc PTA at the beginning because that never happens. Okay, enough of the practice tool. So now that we have a really good understanding of when each rune is better, let's apply it to some real Rek'Sai gameplay. For time's sake, I can't show you all of the dozens of situations from real games that I've looked at in an attempt to fairly figure out which rune is better, but I can show you what I'd consider typical gameplay. You go in, try to burst one target with your team, and then get out. As we established earlier, PTA is going to outperform Conqueror in this situation. You're just not in combat very long. But, sometimes, like in this case, we can go back in and look for another target. So we did stay in combat long. However, considering that there was time between our engagements, our PTA cooldown ran, and we got to proc it again on Seraphine, while keeping the damage amp up thanks to this Prey Seeker earlier. I probably don't need to take you back to the practice tool for you to believe me when I say PTA is better for this case too. Remember, for Conqueror to be better, we had to sit and hold right-click on a dummy for at least 6 autos, only for PTA to temporarily be better again once we got the flat damage proc. If we're doing 2 bursts like this in a teamfight, that is, not constantly autoing, it's very easy to see PTA is better. Or look at this case, where I try to burst a single target, which with just 7 autos isn't enough for Conqueror to become better, but the cherry on top comes when I QR the Snar. Conqueror would be giving us 26 AD at this point. Since Q and R have a 0.25 and 1.0 AD ratio, that would be giving us about 32 damage. You don't need to be good at math to see that amplifying her ult by 8% is going to give you way more damage than 26 AD will. Oh, and the cherry on top of the other cherry is that we proc PTA again on Viego. Okay, so a few final thoughts before I wrap this up. I know one of you critters in the comments is going to say, "But Colby, you forgot that Conqueror gives healing." And no, I did not. If you take a look at your match history and go to the Rune tab, you'll see that Conqueror's healing is tracked, and you'll find that it is an absolutely pathetic amount of healing. It is literally negligible. This is because most of the time Rek'Sai gets most of her damage off before Conqueror is fully stacked, so you just kind of run out of damage before you start healing. So, in conclusion, Conqueror is better for the situations where you can't proc PTA due to your target dying, or you losing access from being CC'd, or they just get away from you. PTA is better for just about every situation you can proc it. Also, once you finish Titanic, it's super easy to get the optimal case, where you proc it before using your E and your R, so its value goes up. If you're dead set on building Stridebreaker, which some of you are, Conqueror and PTA are probably about equal damage, because most of the time you're going to be proccing it after your abilities, so PTA's damage will just barely outdamage Conqueror, and that's in the situations where you can proc PTA, which is less often with Stridebreaker. So take Conqueror. This was the first high-effort video I've ever made, so thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content and want me to do more, leave a like. If I was in your game and you got weak-sided, leave a comment.